I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
All right, so Ken Spriggs here, doing a one video build of a part of a new kit from Bandai, and it is going to be the Snowspeeder, and the kit is the 148 and the 144 scale. I'm building just the 144 scale, and if I refer in the video to just 144, you know what I mean. 144 is what it is. The 148 is larger, and then the 144 is in scale with the other kits I'm building right now, the Millennium Falcon, the X-Wing I've already built, and a few other kits that I'm looking at. So I'm just going to build the 144 scale, the real tiny one. And I wondered at first why they only made this 148 instead of 172, but we'll take a look at the kit and you'll see the reason why. All right, so this will be a one-day build. I will get this all completed and with a custom base. Okay, yeah. So here's the 148 scale. And that's still fairly small. As you can see, here's my hand on it. So that's most likely the reason they did that, because it would have been really tiny. As comparison, here's the 144 scale, very small indeed. So, which kind of makes sense. It's not a very big ship. It's actually even smaller than the X-Wing. It's probably about this long, probably twice the length, yeah, for the X-Wing. So I guess that's the reason why. But I'm not going to build this just yet, as I said earlier with the X-Wing. I'm just focusing on the 144 scales at the moment. So I will put this together real quick. This is it. This is all the parts. It's one sprue. And other than doing some black basing, I'm going to use the decals with it and do just some slight weathering. So not a whole lot to do on this, again, just like I did on the X-Wing. X-Wing took me a few hours is all it took. So all right, so I'll go ahead and do that as well. But definitely surprised by the size of these, but I guess that makes sense. It's not a very big craft. So okay, all right. Okay, so I'm going to start building the 144 scale Snowspeeder. And what I did to start was, while they were still on the sprue, I did a flat black painting coating on them. And you can see on the back that it was like a light gray to begin with. And the reason for this is that all the little tiny detail in the panel lines, once I paint the color over this, which is a really light gray, it will still hold a lot of that detail, and especially in the very fine parts here, like the grills in the back. They'll have the black underneath once I do it. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and cut all these parts off of the sprue. And to do that, I have my sprue cutters for most of them, and I have my photo etch cutters for the really tiny, fine parts, like these front blasters, which are really very thin. I don't want to ruin them by snipping too close to them. So let me go ahead and do that, and I will show that in a time lapse, and we'll go ahead and get this whole thing put together and get it ready for painting. Okay. video, I did all the sanding on these parts, and some of these are so tiny, like the little teeny engine exhausts. Very fine. One of them even fell and I almost lost it to the carpet. I hate that. But they all survived. So I have them all sanded, even the little teeny staffs for the blasters, which I just almost lost to the carpet. Sorry. Yeah, very tiny parts. So I'm ready to go ahead and get this all put together. So let me familiarize myself with the instructions. And there really only is one page. The very last page of the instructions is for the 1/44 scale. And then there's a decal sheet, which I'll put on there. And the decals on the last page, and I'll use those as well. The stickers, I'm sorry, not decals. The stickers, I really like the stickers, as I showed in my previous videos. And especially for a kit this small, they'll be good for that. But before I do any of that, let me get it all put together, and then I'll have to get an initial coat of the light, the very light gray, almost white, onto it, and then we're ready to go ahead and do some weathering and detailing. Okay. Completed Snowspeeder, all assembled. Very delicate work. Some of these parts are very tiny and thin and really hard to get together. So for some reason the cockpit canopy did not want to go in right, probably because I have it painted, but there's a few parts that I still have to paint with some black there inside and on the bottom as well. So I'll get a little bit more paint on that, some black, before I do the final coat of the light gray on it, and then start weathering it. That way the detail will definitely get have some black in it and be noticeable. So, and as I said earlier, here's the X-Wing by comparison. Much larger kit, and I guess I just never realized just the size difference of these, because they both are 1/44 scale. So, and it would make sense. I mean, really, this is a cockpit for the X-Wing, so that's pretty tiny. It's a bigger ship, and it would make sense. I mean, this is called a Starfighter, and it does have hyperspeed capabilities, so it's a much more space-worthy craft, whereas these, as far as we've seen, they're only used on a planet surface in the atmosphere. The only time we ever see these is in the battle with Hoth, so I would assume that's the reason why. And the canopy for the cockpit is about the same size as that, and there are actually two pilots in this too. So a pilot and a gunner on the back, and there's a little teeny fine detailed gun. So, all right, so let me get a little more flat black on that, and then we'll get the light gray coating on it. And like I said, there's not much to this. It's already built, and I'm not going to take it apart again. There's no reason to. Once I get the light gray, almost white coat on it, then all I'm going to do is put the stickers on, and right there. And these aren't all the stickers, obviously. Most of these are for the larger 148 kit. There's only a small number that are for the 144. So I'll get the stickers on it like I did the X-Wing, and do a little bit of weathering, and that's it. So that should go together pretty quickly. All right, so let me go ahead and finish up the paint coating, and then we'll be ready to start the stickers and some detailing. So here's an initial coat of the the very light gray onto the kit, and I started some of the weathering already. And as you can see from the black coat, the black basing, it still shows some irregularities in the paint, which is what you want to see. It gives it the idea of detail on the kit. So you're not just seeing a brand new pristine white ship. It has darker colors and things like that. So alright, I started some of the weathering, and I used some of my Tamiya Weathering Masters, the powders, to do some of it. I also used some dry brushing as well with some flat black and some gunmetal. Okay, so that back grill is pretty much completed. So you can see it looks metallic and it looks kind of chewed up a bit. I might even weather it just a little bit more. Okay, and those little back engine nozzles too. Okay, so I'm gonna put the stickers on it, because a lot of this top section here, especially the front and the cockpit, will be covered by the stickers. So once those are on, I can weather those as well. Okay, so that's coming along nicely. Let's go ahead and get those stickers on, and then we'll finish up the weathering and get this wrapped up. Alright, so in the meantime, while I'm getting ready to put the stickers on here and finish this up, I'm going to make a little bit nicer base. Nothing really super fancy, but cut out a piece of styrene, just flat styrene. That's going to be the bottom. Took a piece of styrofoam, as I showed in the previous clip, and I just sanded it down a bit and contoured it with some sandpaper. And right now I initially cut a little groove down into the styrofoam for that base. I took the actual base and I cut it apart. So I cut out a little rectangular section where this stem will go into. And as I showed, that'll go down into the styrofoam. Alright. And once this is done, this whole thing is going to be a snow base. And I'm going to have this all painted white so it matches in with it as well. And sorry about that. And just give it a little base to stick on, something a little nicer than that little flat plastic that it comes with. So, all right. So this won't take too long. And once I get this to the right contour, I'm going to use some material that you make like model railroad scenes with. I got this at Hobby Lobby, and this is for snow. You can't see it there because the price is covering it up, but it imitates snow. And I have some glue. It's really thin glue that is designed for this, and you coat this with it. You almost soak it with it, and you put this on top, and it hardens overnight, and it'll be on there permanently, and it'll give a snow feature, a snow look. So, all right. So that'll just be a little bit of a base, nothing super fancy, as I said, to put on there. So let me go ahead and work on that as well. All right, so I have that where I want it to be positioned, and it's down inside the styrofoam a bit, which is fine because I want it to be nice and solid so I can move this around and not have it pull out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and get it glued in place. And what I'm using here is some glue designed for styrofoam. Styrofoam's kind of difficult. You can't use a lot of glues. It'll just dissolve it and melt it. So this works really well, and it hardens almost like Elmer's glue in a way. It takes a while to harden. Usually I'll let it sit overnight. But what I can do is put it underneath the stand so it grips to the styrofoam, and then I'll fill in this gap here to make it level with the rest of it, and just let it kind of settle in there. Because when I'm done, this whole thing is going to be covered with a snow-like substance, so you won't even see it in there. You're just going to see the stem sticking out, but it should be in there nice and solid, so I can move it around and not have any problem with it. And I'll probably use the same thing to glue it onto the styrene sheet bottom. I've already started to contour it a bit to match it because it's not going to be a perfect square. And I'll sand this when I'm done so it matches up with it. And we'll see. I might paint the bottom or not. We'll see. But it's very light. It doesn't need to have any felt or anything on the bottom. So to cover that up. So we'll see. I might just paint it or just leave it white. All right. So let me get this glued into place and let that dry, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and put the snow on there. And one other thing I'm going to do on here, if it's not too much of a hassle here, is I got this for a larger kit, but it's designed once again for model railroads, and it's a mold for rocks. So these are most of these are pretty big, but this little one right here, I could make a rock and just stick it on one of the edges, one of the corners here. Normally you would use plaster for this. I'm probably just going to use some resin. Make a little solid resin piece for that rock. Glue it right onto the styrofoam, and then I'll just paint it and weather it and make it look like a rock. Okay, so I'll probably do that as well and get that completed. Okay, so there is the foam glue, and I put some underneath the base and over top of it to fill in the gap, to cover it up and level it out on the top. So I will let that dry. This takes quite a while to dry, about 24 hours. So I'll just let that settle there. And that's what I'm going to have in the end, is just the stem sticking out. And that'll be painted white as well. And I'll see if I can get some of the snow material to stick onto it. If I can, then I will. That'll kind of blend it into the base. And once this is done, I'll be ready to go ahead and put the snow on it and start working on that resin rock that I mentioned. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put the stickers onto the kit. I have my instructions here. I have the little tiny Snowspeeder, very small. And the stickers, of course. As with most of the other kits, they give you a choice for the Bandai kit. They give you decals, water slide decals, and stickers. And as I showed in previous videos, I prefer the stickers. A couple reasons. One, if you can see, and it's hard to tell probably on this video, but they're a little darker, more realistic colors. I'm not sure why that is, but the stickers have a better color than the decals, and they're much easier to apply. Obviously, decals, you need water, and you got to peel them off and position them and let them stick, and they tend to break and peel. These stickers are pretty hardy, and they're very thin, a lot thinner than you would think. So I don't even like the term sticker. It's kind of a self-adhesive decal, basically. So let me go ahead and do a little time lapse here again, and we'll get that all on there. And then we'll be ready for the final weathering and finish up the little mini base. All right. Okay, and here is the completed Snowspeeder with the stickers on it. Very, very delicate work because it's so tiny, and I had to use a really brand new sharp X-Acto knife to be able to peel those off and stick them on. And some of them are just so tiny, like the size of a millimeter even. But I do have them all on there, and I'll show you a close-up here in a second. Oddly enough, on the bottom, the instructions show two gray panels right here, which are on the big kit, but not on the little one. So I'll probably have to just paint those with some, maybe some German gray or something to kind of match them up, because they're not included. And I scoured the entire sheet and I just could not find them on there at all. So, all right, and but let me go ahead and I'll give you a close-up of this with the camera, and then all I have to do now is finish some of the weathering and then finish up my base. All right. All right, and this might not be the final position of it, but that's kind of the idea. I have it pretty well centered on there. And then, like I said, that stand bar there, I'm going to paint white as well, so it kind of blends in. You're not going to see it as much on there. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to have a little rock right here that I showed you earlier from the mold. Let me show that to you real quick as well. Alright, so there's the mold, and I do have the resin in there. I made another rock because I had some extra resin, but this is the one that I'm going to use. So let me go ahead and get that pulled out of there, and we'll take a look and see if that's going to work on there for me. Okay, so here we go. And actually, I am going to use both of those, one on either side, as you can see. And while they're still flexible, because they'll harden and become more rigid as they solidify further, they're flexible, so I can actually mold this down onto the styrofoam and use that same glue there to glue these in place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now so that that will dry overnight, and just mold these two into place as rocks. And I know it's hard to tell that they're rocks at the moment because they're this resin color, but you can see the mold is really cool and it makes a nice little rock shape. It's pretty neat. Same with this one right here. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And once they're dried, obviously I'll get them painted like a grayish. Do some of my weathering powders on it to make them look like rocks, and blend in with the snow. So that'll be pretty cool. All right, let me go ahead and get those glued into place as well, and then I'll let that dry overnight. And then all I have to do is a little bit more weathering on the Snowspeeder, and then put the snow onto here, paint the rocks. Okay, great. And then we'll be ready to wrap this up. All right, and here is the snow base with the snow on it. Just letting that dry right now. As I showed earlier, it just comes in a little packet like this. It's made for model railroad displays, so the material's designed for that. And what you do is you have the scenic cement, which is a really thin, you can see it's real watery. It's a very watery glue. You can spray it on, you can brush it on. I just brushed it onto here since it was such a small base. And you really want to soak it. You cannot over soak it. Whatever doesn't stay on will drain off. And I had it in a bowl so that it was most of it fell away. I didn't put any over the rock sections, the resin rock molds. Once that dries, that'll be the last thing I'll do is paint those. Give them some grays and blacks and different colors to look like rocks underneath. I managed to get a little bit of the snow on the base, so it looks like it's like frosted, which is kind of cool. So that'll harden on there as well, except for the ball, so that the cake can go onto it. I'm not going to stick it on there just yet, but I did finish the weathering. Pull this off of here. All right, so it's pretty beat up and chewed up. Dirty and greasy, as the Star Wars crafts are prone to be. Back in there as well, nice and greasy and dirty. So okay, so that's all ready to go once the base finishes drying and I paint the rocks. And I used a couple of get these here. To do some of the weathering, I used some oil paints from Abtalon 502. I used the find that there. I don't know if it says on there or not. It should say on there. Anyway, it's oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry. I used engine grease, which is pretty cool. Actually looks like grease. Goes on pretty cool. And Starship Filth, which is also a nice dark dirty look. So I put it on. I used some thinner for it that's designed for it. This you can get terpenoid, or this is called odorless mineral spirits. Same thing. It's designed for oil paints. Thins it down really well. So you just put some on and wash over a section, and then you dab some on and then brush it off with a flat brush, and it puts little streaks and definitely gets into the detail, which is really nice. So back in those sections there, you can see the engines, how I made them all dirty and greasy, and the way they would look, and those sections in there as well made it look all grease, those little areas in there. Okay, and then the engines on the front too would be putting out oil and grease and that sort of thing. So yeah, so that turned out really well, and that's ready to go onto the stand. All right, so I'm going to let this dry. Once it gets dry enough, in a couple of hours, I'll get the rocks painted and let those start drying as well, and then that'll finish up this build. Okay. All right, so the snow still has to dry probably till tomorrow, but I was able to go ahead and get the rocks painted, and so I can get this wrapped up here and get the Snowspeeder onto the base. Let me show you a look here. That turned out really well. I used several different colors of gray from Tamiya to paint the rocks and get some of the detail inside. And so let me go ahead and put the Snowspeeder on top, and we'll see how that's going to look completed. All right, there we go. So that turned out really nice. Show you some different angles here. And it is movable, so I can position it on the stand there in any way I wanted to. Okay, excellent. All right, fantastic. So that is all complete, and I think that turned out excellently. So especially for the extremely tiny scale of that. So all right, well, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.